Thank you, Anthony, and delighted to see such good attendance for today's webinar. I'm going to try and put Vlad and Alan through their paces in terms of stress testing the artificial intelligence, which Anthony spoke about. But before I do that, I think I'd like to set out maybe a problem statement of what we see as being issues that I'm sure that lots of you wrestle with on a daily basis. And as part of our day job, we spend a lot of time speaking with the analyst community, Gartner and Forrester and IDC, amongst others. And we speak to a lot of CIOs and CISOs and governance, risk and compliance people in the Middle East, in Southeast Asia, in Europe, in North America, and in South America. And I think the team that typically runs through these conversations is very similar. At front of mind is ransomware, because obviously ransomware is no longer about denial of services. It's also now about data, and that data being successfully exfiltrated from your network. It's about the protection of intellectual property inside an organization, whether that be regulated data or software code or some form of IP for manufacturing. It's about the implementation of governance, risk and compliance across the organization, and the ability to demonstrate that organizations are doing the right things when it comes to data. It's about the challenges of accelerated digital transformation and new ways of working with people working from home. And then it's the cloud, whether that's your private cloud or a public cloud, or just a data center which you're using. How do you ensure that all of these new technologies have effective security? Now, if you were to sit with Gartner would give you some very structured advice in terms of what it is you need to do. Because data is a complex challenge, they will tell you, you need to consolidate. You've got too many tools. You don't have enough resources. There's a need to cut out complexity, to reduce cost, and to consolidate the tools you're using. They'll tell you need to standardize your controls across all of the different silos that you're using in your business. And you need to simplify how you understand security and risk across your business. And the best way to do this is to use AI. And obviously AI is front of mind right now for everybody. So companies who are doing this effectively, and I'll move to the guys then to quiz them on how they believe you do this. They're moving to what we call a value-based data security model. So they're moving in a direction where they understand their data, the most valuable data, and they would refer to this as their crown jewels or their protect surface. And when they understand it, they build the controls that they need around that, because not all data is created equal. And once you understand the value of data, the contextual value of data, you can align your governance, your risk, your compliance. You can ensure cybersecurity is working effectively. You can bring stakeholders across different departments, human resources, finance, sales, and you can ensure that there's no longer a false sense of security across the organization. So that's where the industry is moving. And what we want to figure out today is how good is AI at actually addressing these challenges, helping organizations to build this value-based data security model, helping organizations deal with the skills shortage, helping organizations deal with new ways of working. So I'll stop sharing my screen and I will jump straight in to maybe some of the questions, and delighted to have one of the, in my opinion, one of the top subject matter experts anywhere in the world when it comes to AI, Vlad. So Vlad, can you talk to us a little bit about your view on the AI market? Because there's a lot of chatter around large language models like ChatGPT and so forth. And can you talk a little bit about how we use AI in our focus platform to address some of the complex challenges that our participants today wrestle with?
Right. Yeah. So how much time do I have, right? So I'll start with a quick overview of what's going on in the AI space. And I'm sure everybody has kind of heard about all this large language models, ChatGPTs, your everything. And these kind of, well, I'll start with the bad news first. All the security problems that we've been seeing so far are likely to have to be somewhat aggravated by these AIs because they are very good at generating content. And a lot of the new content is going to be derived from what was already there. The amount of content that every company holds is going to increase a lot because everybody is just going to employ these AIs more or less to solve some of their problems. So
Vlad, let me give you a use case, right? I'm a large oil and gas company. I have a ton of data. It's in SharePoint, it's on Endpoint, it's on Macs, it's in Google, it's in Dropbox, it's in OneDrive. It's very complex and it's flying around in real time. And lots of people are saying, you know, AI can fix this problem. How are you going to fix that problem for me using AI? Are you going to use a large language model like ChatGPT, or how are you going to do this?
I was sort of pointing at, yes. So we have our own recipe, the way we're doing this, but it's important to note that a lot of this problem is going to be caused by AIs, and they're contributing because there are a lot of generated text. But we are addressing this by also putting AIs at work. And the thing is, since we're seeing a lot of data, if we are going to put just a large AI to work on the river of data that any company produces, it's not going to be very effective. Everybody's going to have a large compute costs. They're going to have to provision machines, compute power. This is likely to increase in cost in the future. So what we do is we break down our AI into smaller components. We approach smaller problems with small, cheap, low-cost AI, and then we delegate the rest to larger AI, and we filter through the files. And this essentially lowers the cost of operation, because at the end of the day, because you have to see a lot of data in order to minimize risk. You can't just sample it randomly necessarily. You have to make sure everything kind of goes through a system looking at it, and the data is complex. So it's all about the throughput, and sometimes it's about the throughput with compute power that's been supplied by the users.
So Vlad, when we talk about AI, but surely we can just use, you know, a regex type capability to do this. Why would you go down the route of using artificial intelligence to look at this problem versus typical regex type hits?
Right. So yeah, I think the core concept here is complexity, because complexity costs money. If you use any kind of engineering, regular expression, software engineering to solve some of these problems, what you typically find soon enough is that you need to deploy a lot of engineering to cover all the corners, all the special cases, all the ways something can be said, because data is complex and there's just no way to go around that. So this is why we use AI. AI is capable of learning from examples, and this kind of pushes the entire process down to just give us a few examples of what you're looking for. And then we have all this expertise in AI and all these models in our backyard, and they are going to kind of take care of all the ways that thing can be said for you, and hide all this complexity under the hood of a smaller or larger model. But essentially, at the end of the day, it's all about the cost of operating the system, and the cost of the system seeing all the data.
Okay, and when you are an organization who want to consume AI, what type of privacy issues are there? I mean, does an organization have to take all of their data and fire it up into a random data center where people are going to sift through that information? Can you talk a little bit about trust, transparency, security? Because if I'm an organization and I'm thinking about AI, I think my first instinct is going to be to gravitate towards what type of security is embedded in this whole system, who's looking at my data, and how does this work?
Yeah, this is a very sensitive issue for security people and for the stakeholders, because sometimes the AI is off-premise and you need to transfer data to it to analyze the data. So we've been spending a lot of time looking at how do we keep the data on-premise? How do we deploy as much of the AI on-premise and not transfer it to some third party? because people don't want, people are so kind of sick of ULAWs and reading through all kinds of agreements, and there's so much regulation in various stages of development related to what you can send to AI and what AI can digest and so on, that people just say, I just want my data on-prem and I don't want to send it to a large AI system. I don't know what's going to happen there. So what we do is we have a very specialized solution for it that we're very proud of. We generate some sort of an intermediary representation of the data that contains all the information that we need to see that is relevant for the classification, but that doesn't contain enough information to reconstruct the original data. And this you could hold on-prem. We could definitely do the classification on-prem and never have it leave your company security perimeter, but it can also be sent to our backend. And you know that this is anonymized, this is scrubbed, this is somewhat trustworthy because it's heavily compressed. It's just what we need to take in order to do our job. And this ties into the whole concept of trust, because we expect that trust is going to be a major issue, along with compute power. Trust is going to be a major issue in the coming years, because nobody really knows what these large AI systems do, or how the data that they ingest is going to be parroted back to some other people when the AI system is retrained on them. There's a ton of literature on that, or even how the data that they ingest is going to be biased by other influences in the AI system. Like, you could have your company data being reinterpreted by some AI who was exposed to something toxic, and so on. So our solution of just compressing everything to the bare minimum that we need to do our job, to see if something is sensitive or threatening, is I think opening up a whole market of people who are wondering about these issues.
Anthony, I have a question for you. Vlad is the guy building this, world-class backend AI capability, but you're a guy who's worked in this data space for a long time, and you've seen all of the technologies that are available, and but the market is evolving quickly, right? People are putting data in the cloud and Salesforce and in different ERP systems. And when you're looking at classification, it's no longer enough just to classify documents as they're being created. You need to be able to look at data in transit. You need to be able to look at data that's coming in and out of different cloud systems. Can you talk a little bit about the connector capability that Getvisibility delivers, and why is that important in the new digital era that we're continually evolving through?
Absolutely. So, over the past decades, the migration to cloud has been driven predominantly by the need and the want to share data, the need and the want to collaborate. So when you think of your SharePoints, your OneDrives, you think of your massive petabyte-sized storage devices. They are all designed with the idea to share data as quickly as possible for collaboration. What you lose as part of that is you lose the ability to keep your arms around your data and understand who has access to that. So understand who has access to it and what that data is. So you understanding your data, having a classification and having the knowledge of where your crown jewels are is hyper important. And the Getvisibility Focus product has a number of connectors which integrate with a large number of data repositories, and we can correlate all of this data across all of your data repositories. So that predominantly the main ones that customers use would be SharePoint, OneDrive, and large file shares. And we can scan and we can discover data, we can find duplicate data or data that we have identified as critical crown jewels such as intellectual property, and be able to identify who has access to that. And then why has this person over here in a finance department got access to intellectual property for
Anthony, let me challenge you on that, right? You've seen every scenario that you can see, right? I'm a large company, I have a lot of data, we're overstretched, we're under-resourced with a heavy regulatory mandate we have to demonstrate compliance to. we're worried about bringing another tool into the business because of the heavy lift that's required to deploy it and to get accuracy and to get the type of output that we need. How can you get me to a comfort level that this isn't going to be software we buy which sits on the shelf?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and one again with the cloud adoption, moving everything to cloud has reduced the amount of on-premise staff that's needed to run an enterprise. So it does mean that teams are stretched. Teams don't have the ability. It's a big headache of getting your arms around this challenge to a small team of data protection officers, or maybe there isn't even a data protection officer in the company. The ability for Getvisibility Focus to be able to connect with multiple data sources it means that we can correlate all of this data across the entire estate, and it's a one-stop shop for you to enable you to discover every bit of your data across SharePoint, OneDrive, file shares, and others that we connect to.
So Anthony, we have a question here from one of our participants, and who are our main competitors? You're obviously ex-Varonis, so you're an old hand at data security. Sorry to put you on the spot, but why would you go with new cutting edge technology such as Getvisibility versus some of the legacy players that are out there? Who do you think we compete with the most? And to layer that in, why, and I know I'm asking you a few different questions, why is classification important to effectively enable DLP? So there's a few questions lined up there for you. If you could take a crack at that, please.
Absolutely. So I'll address the first one. Is why Getvisibility and not some of our legacy competitors. The answer is twofold. So first of all, as you alluded to, and Vlad certainly is one of the most eminent data science leaders in Europe, if not the world, and our AI that powers Getvisibility products is top class. It's cutting edge. There is no way without using AI to get your arms around this problem. There is just too much data. It is growing too quickly. And as Vlad has said before, with more companies using AI to create data, it's sprawling. There is no other way that you can get your arms around this issue or this problem without using AI. That's the first thing. The second point is we are using cutting edge technology for the back end to our platform. The platform is using microservices architecture running on Kubernetes. We're using a cloud-based orchestration, and we have a CI/CD type software development pipeline. These allow us to scale extraordinarily quickly. We can update our product absolutely within a matter of hours if needed. It allows us to be very, very agile and respond to the newest technology that's out there. We're able to deploy new products, new features extraordinarily quickly, far quicker than any of our competitors who might need patches or quarterly releases or things like that to bring new features. We can do it almost instantaneously, and that's a huge advantage. And that is the path forward for software, for enterprise level software. It also means that we're bringing a SaaS level of experience to an on-premise deployment. It allows us to act extraordinarily quickly and give the customer that seamless experience. So to move on to another question on DLP. So the way that when we discover and classify our data, we integrate with a number of DLP partners. And we use metadata tagging to allow our partners to read and understand the data that we have classified, so they can use their technologies to protect that data from egressing from the business in a number of different ways.
Alan, we're a large ministry in the Middle East, and our data is predominantly in Arabic, while we do have some other data which is in English. And there is a lot of different departments touching that data, and we are concerned about the ability to build an accurate taxonomy to understand the data. And we need stakeholder engagement, right? We need people in different departments to be able to contribute, but everybody is too busy. Can you talk to me about how we address this problem, how we help organizations to get to a place where they have a very good accuracy on their classification, where they enable security, and where stakeholders are bought into the concept of building a better security program? And if you could share some examples, please.
Yeah, sure. So one of the languages that our machine learning models are trained on is Arabic. We don't need many other much information to get started with that, but we'd like to engage with the customers that we are building a custom taxonomy for, and get the information about what's important to them. So every organization is going to have different document types and different pieces of information that they are under regulatory compliance for. So we like to get in touch with the stakeholders and also domain experts in that organization to start building a custom taxonomy. Now, this can be quite complex, but it allows us to be able to identify in a simplistic way in the output the information that's important. So Vlad maybe can talk about how we do the machine learning on different languages, but us on the front end building the product also are capable of displaying those languages in the user's own native tongue. So the custom taxonomy themselves, users can develop it in the front end, and they can decide the different classifications and different, say, compliance that each region might have. So a lot of countries, say, would have multiple offices a lot of companies would have multiple offices in different countries. And we know that there could be different regulations and different import and export regulations based on that information. So Getvisibility works with domain experts and stakeholders to build that perfect custom taxonomy for an organization.
Okay, so we have a question here, right? We can perform the scanning via Forcepoint DLP. Why do we need to use the Focus platform? So I'd like to set out a scenario first, and I'll open the floor up to the three of you guys to maybe give me your thoughts on this. But one of the problems we set out at the start of this webinar was ransomware. And obviously ransomware has evolved in the nature of the threat, right? So a typical breakdown of what it looks like is that a user clicks on a link, somebody gets control of their profile, they escalate privileges, and then they navigate their way around the network. They'll typically install something like Cobalt Strike, they'll map out where data is, they'll escalate privileges, and then they'll successfully exfiltrate data off-prem before they encrypt it. So the problem is no longer the encryption. The problem is the data which has been taken, because that results in regulatory problems. It results in downstream attacks on customers and employees. So risk is a big problem, and quantifying risk as it relates to data is challenging because of the nature of data changing. So when we think about risk, we have to think about legacy data, we have to think about dynamic data, and we have to think about data in transit. So if you were to engage with Getvisibility on our Focus platform, how does this set up a foundational layer to deal with risk? And if you could all, maybe you may have different perspectives on risk, because it's a nuanced topic. But if we could maybe tie this back to why a one-off scan is not enough, and why dynamic risk governance is important in a platform like Focus. So I'll open up to all three of you, and if you can maybe share your thoughts on risk, because at the end of the day, this all boils down to risk mitigation.
Absolutely.
Sure.
I'll just jump in there and give some experience, some background from some of my experience. So back in a former life, I worked for one of the best cybersecurity companies, and it was back in FireEye. And one of the things when we used to work with customers was when they had a breach or they had an attack, first question that the CISO would ask was, well, what's been taken? What was on that data? What was that data? And it was unbelievable to see the amount of companies that they just don't know it. And then the second question is, who had access to that data? And again, there was this kind of silence. It's hugely important to understand what data you have exactly for the circumstance of if it ever gets taken. It's one of kind of like basic hygienes that is kind of overlooked for a more defensive posture when it comes to cybersecurity. Everybody's very focused on the external threats, who's trying to attack us, who's trying to get in, who's trying to be the ransomware attacker. But the basic hygiene of understanding your data, understanding who has access to it, gets overlooked, and it boils down to that. When things get critical and when things get serious, they're the two questions that need to be answered. And when it comes to regulation and governance, it's always going to be a regulator who will come in, and they're the first two questions they will ask. And I've seen many companies who will stumble and have very, very difficult weeks and months to try and recover from a breach when they do not know who has access to data. It starts down a path of huge forensic investigations, costly investigations, having to bring in external third-party consultants such as Mandiant to go through and figure out who accessed what data and when. And it all boils down to access and understanding.
So we get the point, right, that you have to understand your data. So Vlad, I want to jump to you. We get it. Data is important. We have to understand it. Surely we can just run a scan, and that's going to, using various different tools, it's going to tell us where data is. I mean, how do we mitigate this risk? How do we ensure that the real data, that we're implementing controls to mitigate that risk? Let's get a bit more granular in terms of this problem, because it's fine to say we have to understand our data. Everyone knows that. It's a completely different problem to actually get your arms around it. So let's the rubber hit the road. Let's get a bit more granular
Sure.
on what this looks like.
Well, and the bottom line is that everybody has their own strategy to mitigating their risk inside their company, and there's a lot of spread between how people would choose to deploy all kinds of tools based on their understanding of data to mitigate the rules. And this basically dictates what do you need to understand about the data. So some people are interested in what is the sensitive data, other people are interested in confidential patents and so on, all kinds of aspects and facets of the data that they see that tie into like third-party tools or systems or practices into in their company. And this essentially is, again, complex business. So not only you have the problem of understanding the data itself, which is complex, but you also have the problem of understanding the data in many different ways and turning around to people and explaining to them in a simple way, this is the data that's putting you at risk based on your criteria. And this is not a trivial problem, because people will have different definitions even about what confidential means. They'll have different understanding of what PII means, or they will be subject to different regulations between countries. So their whole definition of what risk is and what they need to do with the data after they've understood it is different. This is why it's very important that the AI is tailored to the needs of the customer, and that we maintain the capability at Getvisibility to turn around quickly based on a small number of examples, and tweak the AI in such a way that it responds to all these exigencies. And one last thing I would say is that this is really a deep pool of problems, because some of these problems are sentiment based, like people may see that data is risky if it's carrying a negative sentiment about their brand or their company, or some of these problems are very focused, like very laser focused on some technologies that you don't want to disclose. Some of them are again regulation driven, like personal information. So it's a whole zoo of issues that have to be translated into something simple that makes it to the security officers or to the stakeholders. And they just want to know, do I have a problem here or not? They don't want to know about all the LLMs and the machinery behind that.
So Vlad, we have a question, right? On the data side, you're leveraging LLMs to depict the better accuracy, to do suggestion, AI-driven classification. How about the user context and classification behavior? Any plan in this direction to build user classification behavior ML?
Well, that is an awesome question, because we've had that on our roadmap for a while. it's very important, and we are correlating, of course, who accesses the data with the data, and it's very important to integrate this into more machine learning, because the connections between who accesses the data and the data that's being accessed are also complex, and there are subtleties in detecting an attack or detecting which kinds of connections between the users and data are inappropriate or anomalous, right? And then preparing that information for a SOC type organization. So we're looking at how we could integrate, apply artificial intelligence in this field, not just about the data itself, but also who accesses it. And this is closely connected to the trajectory of the data in the company, the lineage of the data. So as data changes, you now have a process that is describing how the data changes and who impacts the data and who accesses it. And this draws a complete picture that you then have to put in several categories, like normal, anomalous, threatening, non-threatening, and so on. And this is yet another complex AI problem, and I could give you examples of why it is complex.
Alan, when we talk about risk, are we run a scan on a very large data repository, and it's going to tell us what type of data we have. And in my mind, if you're building a world-class data protection program, there's a few pillars you need, right? You need to know where is the data, how sensitive is that data, because not all data is created equal. Should that data flow through your ecosystem, right? If you're Dubai airport or the airport in Saudi Arabia or wherever it might be, is passport information flowing in the right direction and so forth? Who's got access to that data, and how well is that data protected? So there's kind of 5 pillars, which make a lot of common sense in terms of data. And I would argue that at the bottom comes DLP and encryption and access rights. But you need to put the pillars in place first to understand, where is it, what is it, how it flows, and who has access to the specific types of data. So we're talking about risk, and we can generate risk reports, but how do you action those risk reports? What type of steps do you need to implement to ensure that you're actually taking the right steps in the right direction to start mitigating this risk? If you could talk maybe about a little bit what that journey looks like.
Yeah, so when we start off data risk report, firstly, we gather information about the company itself. So we use FAIRS as factor analysis of information risk, and that's what we base our risk reports on, is the standard. And that means that we gather a lot of information about the users and the data and the planning procedures, policies that a company has. So when we do a risk report, it is a bespoke risk report. We're saying this is the risk concerned with you, the organization we're doing it for. So we gather the information in the file servers, the cloud, the content of the files. And this is one of our pillars, the content risk score. And this is what you'll see in the reports. And this will have a look at the information in files, which is important to that company, and say, if this information is leaked in any way or is put somewhere else, you're going to have problems either regulatory, financial, reputationally. And that's a risk. Secondly, we take a look at the access. So the users that have access to files. And we spoke earlier about, say, risky users that, say, have access to too much sensitive information or that are oversharing information. We then take a look at, so that would come under the access risk. We then would take a look at, say, endpoint risk. Now, this would be information that's on people's laptops and how they are, say, integrating with file servers, or how their information is flowing between file servers. Then we take a look at what I mentioned, the audit risk. So audit risk is an analysis of the policies, procedures, and the software and hardware that's in place in the company and how that would mitigate risk. And finally, then we would take a look at data in motion. So this is dynamic risk. So as data is being created, it could be completely normal that a company is creating sensitive information at certain times of year and there's spikes in it, but we're checking here for any anomalies. So say someone was leaving the company and there's a spike in creation. This is the sort of thing that we're looking at in dynamic risk. So we place these on the risk reports. and we put scores on them. Now we have our own bespoke models for calculating risk, and they take in information, as I said, about the customer, about access, about the content of files, all that good stuff that we're getting from machine learning, as well as all the stuff, all the information that we have about the organization itself. We then quantify this information and we put them in the reports, and we also use a logarithmic scale here when we're looking at these numbers. So when the final report, like this one, like an executive report, is put in front of decision makers, they can easily say, well, this 8, that's riskier than this 4. And you can quantify it, and we can say, we need to put our remediation into this place here, in this particular one, say, having a look at sensitive and regulated files that are available to everyone in the
Can you give me examples of remediation? How is that orchestrated and automated? How can, if you run this risk report, if you ask the question, should we fall victim to a double ransomware attack tomorrow? What's our blast radius in terms of the damage that would happen would occur when that happens, and how do we mitigate that risk? Can you so we've run the report. The report has told us our risk is 9. How easy is it for us? Because remember, we don't have enough resources. We're overstretched. We're under-resourced. We've too many projects on the move. How can we now mitigate that risk, and how can we ensure that the organization, should it fall victim to an attack, that we are actually in a good place from a data perspective?
Sure. So what you're seeing here is a very abstracted level of what we're after scanning. So all the files and users that we have quantified here into a single number, we have information on those in the back end, say in the likes of a CSV or a JSON-L file. So we would get this information on, say, all the files that are in a position of high risk, and we will be able to run that, say, with a script or with some of our other pieces of technology to put encryption on the files or to move them to a safe location. Also, we have the ability to write tags at scale. So write metadata onto your files at scale to protect them as part of a wider, say, DLP solution. So this, customers have already seen this in Synergy, where we write metadata tags onto files as they're being created. And this is also now moved into our Focus product, where we're doing this on the data at rest, or the unstructured data. So putting protections on files could be done by either removing them, encrypting them, or putting metadata tags on them, or doing all 3.
Okay, Vlad, let's go back to the AI, because this is, I mean, this is a big part of this discussion is drilling down into the AI capability. Where's AI going? I mean, what's the next step? We've seen the LLMs. We're talking about narrow and tailored models on AI. Where are the bets going in the next evolution of AI?
I think the safe bet is to say it's just bigger. It's going bigger. It's going to eat more of the everyday tasks that everybody does into a normal operation. It's going to consume more compute power. It's going to attract more capital and more funding, and it's going to be more and more present in our daily lives. And that will essentially ramify into more data being generated or put through AI. More of the processes having AI in the middle of a long process, even security processes having more and more AI, and more of the security posture being dictated by AI. Like today we have a lot of, I'll give you a very quick example. Today we have a lot of, many people are talking about social engineering and security, and I'm sure you have a long experience with that from your position. But I'm looking forward to the day where AI is going to be an important factor in this, because manipulating the AIs to give you sensitive information about companies, even if you don't have access to the information itself, is going to be an interesting thing. This is why we're looking very closely at securing the connection between people and AI by using the type of framework that we're building to understand the data. How do you know that the person talking to ChatGPT is not leaking confidential information that could then be used by a malicious third party?
I've 2 questions here, guys. I'll open it up to the floor. The first is, it is mentioned that Getvisibility scans endpoints for sensitive data. Is this option available in Focus only or Synergy?
So I'll just take that one. Focus does have the capability of scanning endpoints. we would mount them like a network drive. So we also then the Synergy agent that's installed on the laptop would also have that ability of searching for data and creation. So that is how we would do that. Yeah.
Okay, we have another question about enforcing classification as confidential when it's not, and it's viewed as public, and the classification capability is forcing the users to classify it as a specific setting. I think the answer to that is that the hardening of the enforcing of those settings can be set to being open, so that users can, depending on how the organization wants to train the AI model, the users have the ability to classify or to override the classification in the training modes for the AI. Do you agree with that, Alan?
Yeah, exactly. I think this is one of the capabilities that we built in to help in say policy creation or people getting started in their data protection journey. So you might have domain experts who are allowed to say disagree with the AI to say, you know, this is what it is. That helps us get better. There also might be other users in the department who maybe don't have that privilege, and we can enforce classification there and say what you need to agree with what the domain experts on the AI said under classification, or also we have the possibility then of setting that to the confidence of the AI. So as we spoke about, every organization is different, and we start training, maybe there's certain pieces of information that our AI needs to get better on. And that's where we engage with customers to get better. But then we can say, if the AI is not confident over, say, 80%, then these users can disagree. So it is different with each organization, and this is why we built it, to allow for the customization of these models and to improve then accuracy and the creation of a robust data policy over time.
Okay, Anthony, in the 20 years I've been doing this, I've seen security programs across many different initiatives fail. And they fail for a host of different reasons. They fail from a lack of scoping of the project. They may fail because there's lack of resources. They may fail because there's a lack of understanding on the outcomes. Why is it that we have such a high retention rate, and what makes it different about having a Getvisibility focused platform? You know, what is it? Because you're the operational guy, right? You're the guy who makes sure that these customers, when they buy this technology, they know what they're getting, they know what the scope of the project looks like, and they know what the outcomes look like. Can you talk a little bit why programs like this could fail, and what it is you do from a delivery perspective to ensure that clients maximize the value from this?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, many programs fail, you know, for a number of reasons, some of which you've outlined, and one is buy-in as well. You know, there's some people, maybe some detractors in the organization, who don't see the value in it, but those who have kind of gone through the experience will understand how big of how huge the value of having your understanding of your data and a data security posture is. What we do is we enable customers and we take them on the journey. There is an entire A to Z when it comes to implementing a new data security posture. So understanding your data really means, well, asking the question, what is important to you as an organization? Because what might be important to you as a bank may not be as critically important to a law firm or a defense contractor. And understanding what is important to you then defines your protect surface. So, okay, we can understand that this is really classified data that does not leave the organization, and we develop a taxonomy around that. So we take the customer on this journey through from zero and having no insight into their data, through defining the taxonomy and writing this taxonomy into the product. So it's there for them. This is theirs. This is custom to them. And then we have the custom machine learning. So that is theirs and it's custom to them. And this enables the customer to have this ease of use we're hand in glove when it comes to working with the customer as part of this journey.
So Anthony, we have a question here. You can see it in the chat, right? If you could take a look at that question, and if you can give us an example of the lift that's required in the fine tuning of the model to get the accuracy that's needed. Because I mean, I've through the years, I've worked with tools where we've had to build regex hits and we've had to deal with false positives, and I understand the timeline that's associated with that. So if you could maybe talk about what type of lift is required to get the accuracy on the focus product, and what does that look like from a lift perspective, and also what does that look like versus maybe some of the legacy tech?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I mean, this is a great question, right? And the one thing you don't want to do is buy a product like this and have to throw huge resources at it for weeks on end to try and get accuracy. And I know there's a couple of different techniques, from off-the-shelf models to fusion to batch uploads to our own professional service delivery capability. There's different ways of doing this. So if you could maybe drill into a few of those points, because I think this question is absolutely critical.
Absolutely, and you know, the product as a whole is there to enable our customers. We're not to burn time for our customers. We want to bring value so that customers are doing more with less. There is a number of different ways of doing it, and part of our ease of use is a lot of one of the most primary ways of doing it is through the dashboard. So we can, for one example, is we can define custom machine learning tags. A customer can identify documents that are specific to them, or that they would like to find or define a tag for, and they can identify through the UI in a very, very simple way positive examples of those documents. We can also, through the UI, in a very, very easy way, define negative examples of those documents. So documents that are very, very similar, and the more similar, the better to train the model. And we can identify them through the UI, and then this gets sent back to our data science team. And Vlad, he can go into the nuts and bolts and the maths of it all, but it then trains that custom machine learning model, and that gets deployed onto the customer side through our CI/CD pipeline. So there's no additional deployment needed by the customer. It all happens in the background. It's all very, very easy. The customer has a couple of other different options as well for training the model. In the UI, again, they can identify individual files and change the taxon or change the classification from what the machine learning model thought it was to a definitive, yes, this is confidential or this is public. And again, that's recorded in the background and is utilized when training the model in future. Vlad, do you want to talk a little bit more in depth about that?
Yeah, sure. This is a topic that's very dear to me, because this is the subject of a lot of research on our side. The problem that the DS team in Getvisibility has is, how do we lower the number of files, the number of examples that you need to get? Because there's a difference between the user experience of just selecting a folder with maybe some 100 files in it and sending it to train a specialized machine learning model with one person. And
Vlad, could I give you an example? I remember
Sure.
a few years ago, we were doing a project with a different tool, and it was a university in Bahrain. And this specific university practiced in the medical arena. And I remember we had a team based in Bahrain, and they were spending literally weeks building regex rules for the classification of data so that they could enable an effective DLP strategy, right? And I remember that the lift that was required to try and identify medical documents and accurately find them and tag them using regex and eliminate false positives was an enormous lift in terms of effort, right? So what I really want to get to here is, I know you have a regex capability within the back end of Focus, right? But what's the real difference in terms of the lift of being able to batch upload and train the AI versus just pure legacy regex?
Yeah, this is the area that we're kind of working on, and there's a lot to say about this, but I'll just say this: the experience that we're aiming for is a user just selects a bunch of files and then a small number of files, as small as possible, and then positive and negative examples, as Anthony was saying, and then sends it to our backend for training. And that's about it. You don't need to hire a team. You don't need to go through a whole bunch of approval process, security issues, red tape, and so on. Worth noting that regular expressions will be there for like pinpoint stuff when you need to make sure that something absolutely is flagged all the time, like super sensitive detectors of very specific use cases, corner cases, but that in most scenarios, people are just interested in a broad eye view of their data. So what they're mostly, the typical interaction would be just selecting a bunch of files. And as Anthony was saying, being coached by us into what kind of files to select with minimal resources, and then receiving a machine learning model that is able to run at large and classify, find examples, other examples like those files efficiently with minimal resources. This reduces the time by a lot, and not just the time spent actually working and computing and the resources, but also the regulatory time, like the number of approvals that you need to get to interact with the system in this way. And we're getting better and better every day at spinning faster and faster and refining our processes.
Anthony, what are the most prevalent use cases that we're seeing coming out of the Focus platform? Because there's quite a lot of different use cases. Which are the ones that are driving the appetite for the platform?
So it's a great question. There is a number of specific requirements that governance and regulatory compliance that's coming in now. There's a huge amount of focus in some regions on understanding like data classification and having your data classified, particularly in certain industries such as banking and legal. DORA is coming into Europe, and that has a big impact in understanding your data as well. Governance and classification is a big driver, but also from a cybersecurity perspective, data security is equally as big as a driver. To be able to protect what your intellectual property is. We have a number of customers who.
Anthony, who in the organization gets value from the output from Focus?
So the data protection officer will get probably the biggest and quickest impact from this. So being able to run reports, being able to see who has access to what, being able to understand where the data is, where the sprawl of data is, see where the data is growing in its quickest capacity. That's the quickest win from it. When it comes to other teams within an organization, cybersecurity team obviously can really benefit from having the understanding of the data, as we alluded to earlier, and we've spoken about, when it comes to should any issues happen with regards a threat, be it either an external threat or the insider threat. The insider threat is one which again is often overlooked from a cybersecurity perspective. Why have people access to particular data, and why have they been hoarding it on their OneDrive type question? These are really valuable pieces of insight for the customer. So the IT teams as well get huge value from understanding the data as well, because we end up talking to IT teams and they come back to us with all of this shock that they're like, oh my God, I didn't know how much data we had in our OneDrive, or I didn't realize how much data we had in our SharePoint, or I didn't know we had all of this legacy data in this really expensive hard
Anthony,
drive.
on that point, right, a good question there from Luke, right? Look at data loss as an entire program with Getvisibility, having a partnership with ForcePoint for a full DLP suite. How does Getvisibility integrate with other DLP platforms such as Symantec, Microsoft, Proofpoint? Is there a way to ingest the labels into the tools to look out for data egress with the Getvisibility labels attached, or is this explicitly ForcePoint at this time? If solely Forcepoint, is there anything in the roadmap to add integration with DLP tools?
Yes, so it's a good question. Forcepoint, obviously a very close partner of ours. We integrate extraordinarily closely with them and across their DLP product suite. But we are, you know, in some ways agnostic to the DLP provider by the way that we write data to the individual files. So we write metadata tagging to files on SMB, and we can write metadata labels to files in G Drive. And
so is it fair to say that if you scan an entire network, you classify all of the data, you write to file tags to that data, that then can be read by Microsoft or by Proofpoint or by Trellix or by Symantec and so forth?
Absolutely, that integration is there. So those DLP providers can read those tags and can understand it and then take policy actions upon them.
So would it be a fair assumption to say that if you discover your data, if you understand the sensitivity of your data, if you understand who's got access to that data, and if you accurately classify it, you can then start doing very effective risk mitigation, right? You can get rid of deduplication, you can restrict access, you can clean up redundant, obsolete, and trivial data, rot. And then as an entire data security program, you could almost argue that the hardening of that data comes last, because you've cleaned up the stuff that's everywhere. You've built in the controls that are required, the hygiene controls on the data, and then you've locked it down. And then you can look at, okay, should we fall victim to a ransomware attack tomorrow? We now know we've implemented a really robust data security profile for our data.
Absolutely, it's about the journey, about understanding your data, cleaning it up, getting rid of the rot. The return on investment is huge because you're getting your arms around the problem, and then, as you say, you combine this and as part of the journey, implement the data loss prevention tools, and you're in a very strong position because you have removed, as you said, the redundant, obsolete, and trivial data. Data which maybe you shouldn't have due to retention periods and your government's policies. Data which maybe shouldn't in geographical regions be there. Or you can take data which is sitting on very expensive hardware or very expensive disks and move them to cold storage. So there's a huge return on investment straight away without even getting into talking about cybersecurity or data protection. But the real protection then added with the extra DLP layer is making sure that you have that ring fence then around your data.
Can you talk very quickly, for just because we're up on the hour now, so we're going to wrap up in a moment, but just to wrap up, can you talk about the evolution of our, I know we touched on this earlier, but the connectors and the ability to look at data as it's streaming across the wire in the network, and why is that important? Why is that a huge evolution in our capability? And what does that do for an overall risk mitigation and improved data security posture? Why does that make such a big difference?
It's huge. It's a game changer. So it's once you understand your data state, how do you understand the new data? So data streaming and data lineage, as newly created data is being uploaded to OneDrive or uploaded to G Drive, it'll instantaneously be captured by Focus and be classified. That gives an instant lockdown. That's a huge value for a customer from a cybersecurity and a data loss prevention a data loss prevention perspective. Also, it gives you the ability to run reports because we use a very, very fast database in the background. Those results are instantaneous. Your data protection officer, your cybersecurity team, will be able to run reports instantly on data that was created within hours of it being uploaded to a location. So it's a game changer when it comes to the flexibility and the ability of the product.
Okay, folks, we're just come past the hour, so I want to thank you all today for that really interesting conversation. AI is definitely hot right now, and I think what we're seeing in terms of the evolution of the capability, both from a narrow model perspective and the mesh architecture, Vlad, which you and your data science team have built, is making huge impacts for clients who want to demonstrate a quick return on investment and also deal with the challenges of lack of skills and requirements to enable effective compliance, adherence. I think we didn't really talk much about the multilingual capability, but being able to deliver this AI across multilingual enterprise accounts in Southeast Asia, in the Middle East, in Europe and in North America is really transforming how organizations are building these programs really effectively and ensuring that the programs are actually a success and that they can have very, very clear milestones in terms of what success looks like for fixing their overall data security. So thank you everyone for joining today. If you have any questions, please reach out to us, and we'll obviously send on a copy of this recording, and we'd be delighted to speak with you more if you require more information. Thanks everybody.